So hello everyone and welcome to the Internet of Project Development and Implementation.
So this training was developed by YEETS, which is the Youth Employee and Leader Empowerment Training System, which is a professional development system specifically designed to address the needs of youth who are hired onto an organization to provide a youth perspective. YEETS was the brainchild of Stasi, one of our presenters here today, who led its development with a wide range of people and organizations. YEETS relies on youth leadership and input and intentionally leverages youth-adult partnerships to create trainings that are informative, accessible, youth-led, and youth-friendly. All our trainings are free to participants. They are virtual, so anyone can participate across the state, and they take school schedules into account, so they aren't at terrible times, like 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. Our goals are to empower young people to identify and maximize their strengths and passions, to build meaningful skills and connections to other youth, and to form professional connections. This coming school year, YEETS will also be hosting trainings on storytelling, meeting facilitation, LGBTQ advocacy, and leadership development. So if that sounds cool, you should make sure that you are on our email list. Given that this training is 2 hours long, it will be interactive. It will not be us droning at you for 2 hours straight. We're going to have discussions. We're going to walk through several activities. And we ask that if you guys are comfortable doing so, you turn on your cameras during discussion. It makes us feel less lonely, and it's nice to connect your names to faces. We also ask that, in general, you contribute to discussions by whatever method you like, whether it's writing in the chat or it's unmuting. And there are also going to be a good helping of memes. And I'm passing it back to Lauren to introduce herself.
So my name is Lauren Bradley and my pronouns are she, her. I work for the Denver Community Active Living Coalition. I am a former youth advisor and a current program coordinator for the Mount Bella Northeast Denver area. Pass it to Stasi.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everybody. I'm Stasi Snelling. I use she, her pronouns. I currently work at Teens Inc. in Nederland, where I grew up. I started as the Teen Center manager in January, where I supervise up to 7 youth to help maintain the building and plan activities during this after-school program. In May, I left my position of 4.5 years as a youth partner with Rise Above Colorado, where I provided a youth perspective on many different areas of our work.
And I'm Catherine Harvey. I was just talking at you. My pronouns are she, her. I work in rural Gilpin County for Colorado State University, and I run an after-school program for middle and high school youth. I'm a former youth advisor with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. I worked there for 2 years, and I worked at Teens Inc., also a youth serving organization, for a number of years before that. I currently supervise a paid youth leadership team and some part-time youth program assistants, some of whom are on this call, but I won't call you out. Next slide, Chastity. And Stasi's taken over here.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine. So now we would love to hear from all of you. Please say your name, pronouns if you'd like, and age, and then popcorn to somebody else.
All right. I'm Austin Sacco. I am 16 and I work for Eagle 4-H and CAPS.
I'm Cassidy Wood. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm 17 and I also work with Catherine. I'm a youth program assistant and I work with CSU Extension.
I'm Raina, she, her pronouns. I'm 15 and I work with Catherine as one of the other program assistants.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chastity Gentry. I'm running our screens for today. I am also a former youth employee for the Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. I do work with Lauren. I'm now a program administrator and I'm 25.
Hi, I'm Ariana Mojica. My pronouns are she, her. I'm 24 years old and I work as a youth coordinator on the Healthy Transitions Grant for the Office of Behavioral Health.
Hi, I'm Ari. My pronouns are she, her. I'm 21 years old, and I work with the I for Prevention Youth Leadership Team, which is a program through the Public Health Institute at Denver Health. We work in substance-based prevention, such prevention.
My name is Anna. I'm 16 years old. My pronouns are she, her, and I work with Inspire Youth Connections under Boulder County Public Health.
Hi everyone, I'm Ivy. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Netherlands and I'm here with the Mountain Coalition for Youth.
Hi, my name is Mari. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm 16. I work with public health as well.
Hi, I'm Chris. My pronouns are he, him. I'm 19 and I'm working at History Colorado under their Museum of Memory as an intern.
Hi, I'm Giselle. I use she, her pronouns. I am 15 and I work as a youth research assistant for Boulder County Public Health.
Hi, I'm Jemima. I use she, her pronouns. I'm 19 years old and I'm a youth advisor at Denver Health for school-based health centers.
Hi, everybody. I am Jack. I use he, him pronouns. I am 19, and then I work for Mace County Public Health in Grand Junction, Colorado.
I'm Connie, they, them. I'm 19, and I'm interning at Museo de las Americas in Denver.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing out. I really appreciate that. And now I'm going to pass it to Lauren for our next slide.
Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. We're just going to start this with like a quick little conversation just to get into our topics for today. So yesterday you were sent some pre-work with a few questions, and we just love to hear from free people, just sharing what you put down, just hearing more about your project. So some questions you can answer: what project did you pick? Was there anything you struggled with filling out? Was there anything that you were not sure how to do? What went well and what were you best at? So does anyone want to share?
I'll go real quick. So this Saturday, there's an upcoming project because we have to do like a memory workshop, and it's specifically meant for the community of the displaced Aurarians, which is like the group of people that had to leave for the building of the Auraria campus downtown in Denver and stuff. So I'm gonna be participating in that. And I guess I'd say like this week is the prep. So I guess I'm kind of confused as like what my role will be, or kind of like what I need to help do to prepare and help set up.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Ivy, did you want to go next?
Yeah. So my group has been working on a project to get a task force composed of youth and teachers to promote SEL at our high school. And I think a big struggle with that is just figuring out like the end picture, since it's kind of a big project with a lot of moving parts and a lot of people working on, including myself, won't actually be here to see it implemented because we graduated. So yeah, just like figuring out the timeline and the next steps has been an adventure.
We get one more person that might want to share or just have a question that they want answered throughout today's training.
I can go next. So I'm currently working on a community attitude survey that our county commissioners asked for, and we were going to do it out of house. But our team at Mason County Public Health decided that that was one of the roles that we could fulfill. So we have been researching and coming up with all the questions that we're going to ask. And we actually just sent it out probably like 20 minutes ago today. So we're hoping to get a bunch of responses from that. But I definitely think I struggled with the initial research of coming up with all of these new questions and how to really build something from scratch, because we've never done a community attitude survey before, and what questions to ask. And something that I feel like we did really well was just teamwork and kind of making sure that our team was comfortable with the community attitude survey. And when we advertised it to get the final check off from the commissioners, they didn't have any feedback. So we came to the table very prepared. And then something that I was a little unsure of definitely was like how my role was going to be at first. I didn't know if I was going to be doing the initial research or if I was going to be on the back end analyzing the results, but I think I'm doing both now. So that's been awesome.
Well, thanks everyone for sharing. We definitely hope that this training is helpful and giving you a little more of a push and figuring out how you can really adapt your role or just figure out where you can go next, especially with all your amazing projects we've heard about so far. So we're going to pass it over to Catherine so we can start getting into our first section of the training.
Yeah, and by passing it to Catherine, it means Catherine's going to make you watch a video. So this is, again, we're just trying to sort of get us all in the mindset of like, what counts as a project? Like, what are the sorts of things that other youth in positions similar to your own have done in the past? And so this is like a pretty brief, like maybe a 3 or 4 minute video of some youth advisors who a couple of years ago put together like their ideas basically of the different projects that they're working on. So we're just gonna watch it real quick.
One of the big projects that we're working on that involves youth is called Photovoice. And what we're having kids do is go around their community and take pictures of things that help them make good choices and things that kind of influence them to make bad choices. And so the purpose of that is to give adults a visual picture of what kids see in their community and just their perspective on how they live and how they're influenced to make decisions.
So me and Alex are both on a committee called Colorado 9 to 25, which serves youth the ages from 9 to 25. It is separated into adults and youth. And so what me and Alex had the opportunity to do is recruit other youth to join the committee. And what we also got to do was we got to facilitate it ourselves and kind of give like a youth perspective and provide that youth voice on what Colorado 9 to 25 is to get youth interested in joining the committee with us.
As a success as one of the project is, the youth that we presented to are actually wanting to be a part of 9 to 25 as a whole. And as we can show, as youth can be successful.
One of the projects that I worked on in the past was to build a resource map, a behavioral health resource map for Project Aware Colorado. And the reason we had to do that was we wanted to make sure that our grantees, the 3 school districts that we worked with, were using evidence-based programs and interventions for their students. My role in that was to research all the programs, ended up being something like 100, 150 programs, making sure that they were on some sort of national registry and be able to present the information, all of the programs that made it through my review, and present it in a way that made it easy to pick and choose from a large amount of programs. Being able to do that allowed me to be qualified for the current position that I am in as the Marijuana Resource Bank Specialist. It's sort of the same issue, getting resources that deal with marijuana use or substance use among our youth, and putting it in one spot and making it easy for the educators in Colorado to use with ease.
I work tightly with our Youth Leaders Coalition, which is a group made up of about 30 to 40 high schoolers from every high school in our community. Through that, we met once a month and we focused on subjects and interests that were going on in the community. So things about how do we prevent drug and alcohol abuse in our schools, and getting their feedback on that. Just the diverse community of those high schoolers were able to really solve those types of problems from what they saw versus just adults peering into the schools and being like, oh, well, you know, this is what we think we see as the problem. But the youth being like, no, actually, that's not the problem. This is the problem, and here's how we can fix it. And then just adults really taking that feedback and doing things about it. A campaign went around in one of our middle schools led by a middle school intern, and she was able to make a difference by talking about bullying. Her focus wasn't on stop bullying, it was on making friends. So it's just flipping that point of view that adults don't really think about.
The projects I've been working on, the main one I've been working on, 2-in-1 with Mile High United Way, a free resource system where people can call in and get resources on pretty much anything out there. So it could be like birth control, housing, schooling, tuition. And what they're having me do is go out and test the different ways of actually going out and like using their systems. So it could be like phone call, text message, web chat, web search, you know, actually going to 2-in-1 themselves and asking. The other one was we actually look upon different grants and provide youth feedback on the grants. So One of them I provided feedback on was, should like the Denver Public Schools be inputting the health programs for people with special needs, or like say autism, the autism spectrum. You can read through the lines and see, you know, it's kind of, okay, they're really trying to hit on the youth aspect here, or you could see it's kind of, nah, they're just really trying to make themselves look good. It's all for show, basically.
So we also put together a resource if you're interested in, again, hearing about even more examples of different projects that youth employees or youth leaders have worked on. We have a resource that we put of some stuff that Lauren, Stasi, or I have done that we're going to send out at the end of this training. And now I'm going to pass it over to Lauren, and we're going to start walking us through like the actual stages of what it's like developing a project and then implementing the project.
Yeah, so we go to our next slide, please. So just to get started, we're just going to start with what is your job and what projects can you do? Going to our next slide, we're just going to start by talking about roles and responsibilities. First, you need to start off with what is your job description? What are you responsible for? And what were you hired to do? Just really thinking, if you're hired to provide youth perspective, how is this agency or is that project really providing and really geared toward the youth? What can be different? What can be changed? Or if you're just hired to help develop a project or create something, what can you do? Like, is this something that you're passionate about? What are you passionate about? And how can you get your team to understand the need that you feel other youth might have as well? So especially for me and my team, which is a corner in the bottom right picture, when we start off with any sort of event or planning, we start off by figuring out who our planning team is, and then we go into our day of team. So just helping start off our planning team, we have the project lead, which would be you and any co-leads that you might have. So for the garden, the two leads were Chastity and I. We were the youth advisor at the time, and that was a project that was determined that we wanted to keep working on. Then for any meetings we had to determine if there was going to be a note taker, someone to be consistently taking notes. And so all the information was just in one place that everyone can get to, or just someone can send out those notes to anyone that might have missed a meeting. You need to figure out someone to help with the budget, if there's something you can and cannot buy, or how much you can and cannot spend. I know if in our grant, we are allowed to buy certain items and then certain items we can't buy. So that's really good to have someone who knows that information and can guide you in the right direction. Someone that can do outreach and promotion, really getting out there and talking to those who this will affect and seeing what they want and just figuring what's the best way to promote it and really get the word out about your event or any upcoming activities. And if needed, someone that can help with grants, especially if it's your first time. Grants are pretty hard to do and can be a little complicated. So maybe you can find someone on your team that can help you figure out where you can find the extra funding of things that you might need and just really figuring out how to walk through it. And then of course your day of team are just mostly all of your points of contact, someone that can be reached out to if something goes wrong or someone has any questions. And if you have big events or there's something on the community, just an emergency team, someone who is trained to help and start assessing the scene and making sure that that person is being properly taken care of before you can probably get paramedics out there. And just your setup and breakdown to help get your event going, making sure everything's running and going smoothly. And just if you're doing any stations like Little Passport that people have to go to, making sure everyone's set up and doing what they need. So we'll go into our next section. I'll pass it back to Stasi.
Thanks, Lauren. So now we've talked about what you can do. Let's talk about figuring out what you want to do based on that. Next slide, please. So when I started as a youth partner, it was really difficult for me to come up with projects I wanted to do because I didn't know what my choices might look like. One thing that helped me was shadowing some adults at my work. I'm going to walk through an example that kind of goes over the steps I suggest on this slide. And I should preface this example by saying that I was extremely uncomfortable with public speaking. I never wanted to do it and thought I'd never be doing it outside of school. Hi, I'm here. The main person I worked with was my supervisor, Covey, who is pictured with me at the bottom of this slide. Covey happened to do a lot of presenting, and when I came on the job, I knew I might have some opportunities to co-present with her. She knew I was uncomfortable and didn't have much experience presenting. So as I started, I just watched her co-present with others and participated with the audience. Then we started talking about having me help with part of the presentation, and Covey did most of the talking about content, but I gave some examples of how it had looked for me in the past as a young person. I felt more comfortable with this than I did presenting material I barely understood myself. Covey also gave me ideas for how to prepare for presentations and helped me practice them throughout this process. Over time, we presented multiple times together, and while it took me probably a couple of years, I became more comfortable with the idea of presenting and had more confidence in talking about more material. Covey and I have a similar way of operating and preparing for things like presentations. And we also spent time actually building a relationship, all of which contributed to me working more often with Covey. And I found I actually really like helping people understand new topics and making sure presentations were more interactive. Covey would actually always distinguish this by calling them workshops, not presentations. On the flip side, there were some coworkers I didn't really work with very often, and therefore areas of the work I didn't participate in much. One of them was one of the people was Jonathan. A picture of us is on the far right. This picture was actually from one of the only times we worked together. We painted the mural that we're standing in front of. It was super fun and a great bonding experience. However, there hadn't been many opportunities when it worked out for me to do murals, as we did them all over the state. In addition, while I found it super fun, it wasn't something I felt like I needed or wanted to do all the time. This experience was really great in helping me figure that out, that I didn't want to do it. So I found that shadowing people helped me figure out what I enjoyed doing and wanted to pursue. But I also think that the intentionality Covey put into helping us build a relationship contributed to our work being more efficient and fun. And she also became a really important mentor for me. This will go into our next slide.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make you guys talk again because it's your favorite, I'm sure. So these are a list of reflection questions. We would really love to hear from some of you about experiences you've had at your job already, if you are working as a youth employee, of opportunities to shadow people, what went well about it and what didn't, or if you're somebody that you're like, I didn't really have a formal onboarding experience and I haven't had that. Sort of brainstorming about what are good qualities to look for in a mentor or a person to sort of help you out, and figuring out what kind of projects you like to do in the first place or what your skill set is. So I'm just gonna leave it like that. Please feel free to share in the chat or unmute. And I want to hear from at least 3 people.
Okay, so I feel like I'm just gonna say collectively as me and Auckland, what opportunities we have to shadow others is our boss, Catherine. That's the one who was just talking. I feel like she's a really good mentor and we're able to learn a lot from her, especially since she treats us like people and not like employees. Well, sometimes, but like she still treats us like we're human beings. And like, I feel like what good qualities to look for in like a mentor when you're looking for one is just to make sure that you can like actually build a bond with that person, like you can relate to them and they show you that like they're just a human and like everyone makes mistakes. Like someone who doesn't treat you like they're better than you and like that they're like older and they have more experience so that they are just better overall. Like,
yeah, like Catherine actually treats us like we're human beings and isn't like, well, you're teenagers and you don't know anything, so let me just like,
yeah, and she gives us a lot of freedom too, like in our work life, like when we're planning activities or helping with kids or whatever. She's just like you guys do what you think is best. I'll give you a broad thing of what I want you to do, but she's not like controlling us and what we do. She's allowing our freedom to like make mistakes and to like figure it out on our own so that we can like grow into someone amazing like Catherine.
And then also like the shadowing experience that I've had is Cassidy has been working this job for a year. So I've been able to like shadow her and like follow what she does.
She's taking my job.
Yeah.
So that's it. I will mute myself now.
Thank you. I just like started tearing up a little, so I need somebody else to talk right now. And I see Raina posted in the chat, when I was in 6th grade, I shadowed my grandpa in volunteering to see what he did at church, and then I finally got to help him. Yeah, right. So a big part of it is that shadowing somebody, like, right, it's allowing you to sort of see the process that's going on, which can be really helpful if you end up taking that person's role later on, kind of like Auckland and Cass were just talking about. I'd love to hear from somebody else.
I think for me, when I first joined my coalition, I sort of didn't have an official onboarding, and I think that made me like almost quit in those first few months, is because like I had no clue why I was there, and I didn't really align with the message that like the coalition, a lot of what they were doing at the time. And that all changed when I did end up getting to shadow someone, our community mobilizer at the time. And I think the defining thing for me was that they were like super open, and it was something of like first, you know, it's like trusting you to like first go and like shadow a couple of meetings, and then very quickly, like at the pace you're ready, you know, becoming a co-facilitator and then getting to facilitate your own meetings. So yeah, like really having someone that has your back, that like recognizes you as like, you know, maybe the youth, you know, we're supposed to be the ones informing what the coalition does and like them actually mobilizing that. So yeah, I think having someone that like is willing to support you but also kind of push you, yeah, that was really positive for me.
Thanks for sharing that, Ivy. Okay, so another big part of shadowing people is, like a couple of you actually mentioned, it's not just like the adult coworkers that you're working with, right? A really big part of it is being able to network with and shadow other youth that you work with. So that can be youth employees at your organization or youth leaders. And it's anybody that really has like a similar role to yours. So first of all, how do you do this? First of all, you can talk to your supervisor and your coworkers. I think all of us here work in some sort of youth development space. And so I guarantee that your supervisor knows other organizations and other folks in your area that probably work with youth in some capacity and have hired youth or have youth coalitions of some kind. So start out by just asking them and being like, hey, I would love to be able to connect with some other youth that are doing similar stuff if you don't have those connections yet. Another way, attend YEETS trainings and share your contact info as you guys have already done in that document. If you haven't filled out the document yet with your contact info and you want to, please go ahead. This is a great way for you guys to be able to network with other youth around the state. And then another thing that Lauren and Stasi and I think is important to recommend is going to youth-focused conferences if you're able to. So we put a couple of logos up on this slide. The Collaborative Youth Summit, some of you might have gone to. It was this April. The Shared Risk and Protective Factors Conference was just at the beginning of June. And those are really great places. Again, if you are in a rural community or you're sort of isolated and you don't have a lot of other youth to work with, those are really great opportunities for you to like go and have like a structured way to be able to meet some other youth that are doing similar stuff, and just really being proactive in making those connections. Next slide, please. So, when I talk about network with other youth, you might be like, what even is networking? And also, can I not do it if you're me? I hate networking. So the way that I try to think about it is, rather than like trying to like form these weird like pseudo professional connections in a way that feels awkward and uncomfortable, I try to think of it as just like meeting people that also work as youth employees or youth leaders, and just getting to know them and figuring out if I like that person or not, and if I like want to keep hanging out with them and do work stuff together. So it's really about I try to think of it as like a way to make friends through work. If you end up meeting some other youth at some conference or something, and you're like, I don't really like that person that much, that's fine. Like, I'm not saying that you have to go and become best buds with them. But for the people that you do get to know, like there's this picture in which I am in, I genuinely really liked all of these people that I was able to work with for the summit. And so that's what we mean by networking, right? Is it's just it's getting to know the other youth that are there, and then hang out with the people that it turns out you actually click with. And I'll add that Lauren has a really great tip for networking, quote unquote. And she says that we should try creating an elevator pitch where you can describe what you do or what your job is in about 30 seconds. Right? You can write it down. You can practice saying it to other humans. And that gives you a really easy way if you are at a conference or you're at a youth training like this, and we're forcing you to talk to us, of saying, right, this is my name, this is how old I am, this is the organization that I work for, this is real quick what I do. So that's our hot tip for you guys. Next slide, Chastity. And so in terms of like why network with other people, like, right, why shadow with people anyway? There's really cool projects that can end up developing out of that might not have been originally like what you were even hired on to do, but these opportunities end up presenting themselves, which I get super excited about and are my favorite part of my job. So that's why I'm like pushing this on you guys. So these are all pictures from a bunch of different events where somebody was reached out to and they were sort of like, yeah, I know a bunch of other youth employees and youth leaders that might be interested in helping me present on this or whatever the specific project was. And so we all got together and ended up coming up with this really cool thing that we wouldn't have been able to do as like a single youth employee all by ourselves. And so the most recent example of this is Lauren, Stasi, and I, in the upper right-hand corner there, we made a poster about YEETS and what it is and why people should join. Maybe some of you guys saw it if you went to the Shared Risk Conference. So we made that poster together, and then we stood there in front of it for 45 minutes and presented really awkwardly to a bunch of people who wandered by. It was a real blast. Next slide, Chastity. So don't just let me convince you of why it's a good idea to get to know other youth in your area or across the state. We're gonna watch this video now, which again, we made a couple of years ago, and is a bunch of youth employees talking about the value that they saw in being able to connect with other youth in a project-based lens.
Working with another youth employee is very interesting because you get to see what happens at their agencies and why our agencies are partnered with each other.
The first time I met with other youth advisors from the Denver metro area was at a positive youth development training. And honestly, it was really helpful for me because I felt like I wasn't, almost like my job was validated because there were other people doing what I was doing and that they were making a difference in the government, so I could make a difference in my community. So it's just interesting to see how they worked and what ideas they shared with me, and sharing in turn my ideas from my community efforts just because they were a little different, but all in all helping each other.
One of the youth advisors that had my position as a Project Aware youth liaison before me, her name was Alejandra, and I leaned on her for pretty much most of the questions that I had when I was coming in there. Just because she already had the experience of being a youth advisor in my position specifically, I thought that she had a wealth of knowledge that I was able to tap into to be a more effective youth advisor or youth liaison, as that's what we called it.
There's 2 other youth advisors there besides myself. One of them I am lucky enough to share a cube with. We have a giant wall of memes. First, I was a little intimidated by her because she helped hire me. And then we went to a conference together, which ended up being really great because I had never been to a conference before. And it was nice to feel like I didn't have to act like I knew exactly what I was doing because she was also a young person and she got it. And I didn't have to prove that I was good enough at my job. There's just a lot of camaraderie, which is really nice. You're both doing your work and you sort of have somebody to tap on the shoulder and say, hey, what do you think about this? How should I apply to this email or whatever?
I go back to you're better in numbers. More heads are better than one. So it's kind of like, I'm going to use the Avengers quote here. It's kind of like, this guy speaks English.
Unless Sebig has figured out how to stabilize the quantum tunneling effect.
Well, if he could do that, he could achieve heavy ion fusion at any reactor on the planet.
Finally, someone who speaks English. Is that what just happened?
This guy understands me. You're basically working at the same level, so it's kind of, you're working towards the same goal, but you understand each other better than, say, a youth and adult. There's no real speculation or doubt. I don't trust this person. Finding out you have the same sort of end goal, more acceptable for having young people on the job and having a youth advisor in every sort of job out there.
I find myself like code switching all the time with like talking to youth and then talking to my supervisor can look very different, and you just have to find what resonates with people.
Cool. So you were nodding your head like you feel like you do that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even with each other, like how me and LaFonso have meetings, and like and then we'll have like a meeting with the team and like kind of switch that a little bit.
Yeah.
There's been other agencies that will just hire like one youth and they're kind of feel alone in it. It's like one fish in a fishbowl. So it's like, I think we really thrive off of each other, and I'm glad that we are able to connect with our youth coalition, even though we do work on completely different topics.
Excellent. So there's my pitch to you guys. I'm forcing you to make friends with each other. I'm going to pass it over to Laura now.
Yeah, so now that we've chosen the project you'd like to do, let's get into the next session of then plan the project you've chosen. So going to the next slide. Our next focus is on outreach to the audience we'll be serving. The key questions that need to be asked and answered before you can really move on is, how are you going to get the word out? Is this something created for the community members, or is it going to be created by them? Is this a service project with your youth group? Is this a work-related activity that's going to be more internally? You just need to figure out who the audience is and how you're going to let them know about the project that you're planning. On our next slide, we're going to go into a little more of the brainstorming of team. I personally really like using Google Docs to get all the information out to the team. It's really easy to collaborate. Everyone can have access to it anywhere. And there are a few other sites I like to use, especially when getting ideas, such as Poll Everywhere or Mentimeter. And the two examples here are Kahoot and Jamboard, which I do have some videos I can share later on how to use those other resources. But for these two examples, it was for our youth collaborators, Future Denver Youth. We were trying to plan some service projects that we wanted to do and that the members in our group or just community would like to see. So at the bottom, there was the very first meeting. We're just trying to figure out what everyone wants to see at our youth meetings. And some people gave some fun answers like snacks or food, some more how to do more meaningful impact, creating partnerships, having more youth there, just leadership skills. And then about last year, when we were trying to figure out what we're going to do next, we created this Jamboard and just had our youth members just put in ideas that they want to see. So on the top right, we did a little voting using Jamboard. Everyone would just put a little tick on the idea that they want to see. Our top two ones was creating a youth transportation guide, which we're still looking into to this day, and the one that we ended up doing, which was a youth community garden. From there, we started doing our planning and figuring out how we're going to get everything to start running. So I'm going to pass it over to Stasi so we can figure out how to create some Smarty goals.
Thanks, Lauren. So after going through that brainstorming process and deciding on a project, the next step is to actually plan out your project. I know for me, it was difficult to actually know how to start doing the project or what the steps in between even are. Smarty goals are something that has been really helpful in figuring that out for myself. You may have heard of SMART goals. This is just an adapted version of that adds inclusiveness and equity. I am by far not the first person to do this, but I thought it was really important and helpful to add. SMARTY stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable goals. I have created a worksheet with definitions of this that we'll be sharing out with all of you later, but for our time together today, we thought it would be helpful to walk through an example of filling this out. So we're going to use Lauren's community garden example to fill out each section on a separate document. And you're all going to help us fill that out, and I'm going to be writing it down. So you can go to that document, and Lauren, if you are available and want to just share a little bit again about your project to remind everybody.
Yeah, so for our community garden, we were trying to figure out just which areas would really want it more, and just that we can get more information from. We started reaching out to different areas, and that's when we figured out and heard back from a garden in the Montbello community. So we started talking to the garden leader, figuring out more of the statistics that we need, this more of the information, like cost associated, the types of plants they do and do not allow, when you're supposed to be there, what you need, and just anything else that our team would need to figure out on our end and how to actually get into it and just start working on it.
Thank you so much, Lauren. All right, so we're gonna make you guys talk again. I would love to hear what you all think is the overall goal of this project.
I can get you started. Just a way to think about it is our overall goal is to figure out how we can find a way to provide a little more food for the community, knowing that Montbello is a food desert. How can we help get a little more fresh produce to the community that might need it, or just anyone that wants access to some fresh fruits and vegetables?
Great, thank you, Lauren. So would you say that like the goal is to create a community garden in order to provide more food for the community?
Yeah, just get more food out there.
So our first section, also, as I go through this, if you feel more comfortable adding stuff in the chat, please do. I know it takes longer to type than to talk, but if you're more comfortable with that, please do so. And somebody can help me read that. So specific, when thinking about that, I would consider what do I want to accomplish? Specific why, specific reasons, purpose, or benefit of accomplishing the goal. Who is involved, the creators, facilitators, target audience, etc. And where identifying a location or platform. I would love to hear from a couple people if you wanted to answer one or more of those questions.
Okay, so I think like what to accomplish is to provide fresh produce for people in the community, and like the specific reason would be so that people would have fresh produce when I don't like normally have access to that, and it benefits the community by having them have fresh produce because fresh produce is good. health.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, and Stasi, we got something in the chat. Connie says, identifying a space for a community garden that's accessible, likely within a walking distance of residential areas, which is a great accessibility point.
All right, what about, I think we said the what and the why. What about who's involved?
Chris just put in the chat, to be specific, say it is for the Montbello community. That's awesome. I was just gonna say a lot of the time we throw out the word community and then like we kind of run away. We don't actually say who that is. So defining like a geographic population, or like, right, if you're breaking it down by some sort of demographic, like, right, if it's like people who attend this certain school, or like people who are on free and reduced lunch, or like whatever it is who you want to put for who. And Ivy just put for who, maybe mobilizing local community members in addition to youth. So people looking for volunteering or who have time or passion for the project in addition to the group who creates it initially, which is awesome to like think about recruitment and expanding out the number of people that are involved.
All right. And then it looks like we just have where, which I think we kind of identified is Montbello. I'm just going to put that in there. So this is maybe not perfect, but we're just going to keep moving. Measurable. How will you know when your project is done? What will it look like? What will be accomplished? How will you know if it went well?
So I think for this thing, a good way to measure when the project is done is when you have like seeds planted and like maybe you have like sprouts coming up. So like, you know, you have produce on the way. And so like that's like the beginning of it being done, or you can measure it as like actually giving out the produce to the community. So I guess it depends on like how you consider it being done.
Wait, those are great ideas. Other ideas, maybe about how we would know if it went well.
You could probably, like how we know if something went well in our program is you send out a form, like asking the community's advice, asking the community like what they think could be better, what they think could be like what they think about the project overall. I think that would probably work, and that would, so you could know how it went well. I mean,
yeah,
if people are like, oh yeah, like our whole family got produce, this is a great program, I think we should continue with this whole produce.
Or like adding on to that, you could like also look at statistics. So like if you're like, we want to increase the health of the people here, you could look at like the rates of like, you know, stuff that go along with that. Yeah.
Great ideas. Thank you all.
And we just got in the chat, Sazi, Connie says, and probably vote for when the plants are grown, because you wouldn't know until they're grown that they're good quality products, or if there aren't enough plants to provide for the community, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when it happens, and right, it's also like the number of plants is like a measurable thing that we could do if we want to know that we planted and grew to the full amount 10 watermelons and like 50 squashes or whatever, right? Giving it a number.
Okay, so I wrote down like number of plants that the produce is grown and what is the quality of the produce being given out. Those are awesome. Thank you all. Okay, our next one is achievable. Is this project something that can be completed in the allotted time? Is there enough support and resources currently for you to be able to design and facilitate your activity? Can you get the necessary support and resources to do it? So what are some things we'd want to consider for achievable?
So when it comes to like produce and stuff, you're gonna want to like make sure you do it in like a season that produce will be able to grow. Like if you live in an area that's like really cold, you don't want to do it in December because your produce is gonna die. So you want to make sure it happens during like a time where you can like actually grow the produce and like do it in a timely enough manner so that they don't die before you're able to hand it out.
Thank you guys. Looks like Ivy said space available, suitable environment, employee volunteer capacity. Love that too. Other ideas, maybe from people we haven't heard from yet. Any ideas yet? All right, that is super awesome. Is there anything we're missing in this section that I'm not seeing?
You're just making sure you have access to the proper funds or any extra tools you might need, or just figure out who you can go to get it.
Yeah, so figuring out what supplies you need and if you have access to that.
Yeah.
All right. Our next one is relevant. Does this project seem worthwhile? Is it something you're interested in? Is it something your peers would participate in and enjoy? I'm gonna have Lauren answer, is it something you're interested in? And then I'd love to hear from others if you have other thoughts on relevance considerations.
Yeah, I would say especially with this project, it was something I was definitely interested in. I'd always loved gardening and just wanted to learn more about it. And a lot of members in our Futures and Youth meeting said that's something they are interested in as well. During that meeting, we did learn that our team members before Chas and I became youth supervisors, that's something that they've always wanted to do and be a part of. And they thought it was a great chance for us to be able to work on it together and really get this going.
I'll chime in. For relevant, it makes me think about like right? Making sure that it leads back to your overall job description or your goal as an organization, right? Like Lauren is part of the, I'm gonna mess this up, the Denver Community Active Living Coalition, right? So a community garden seems like obviously like from the start that it's very much something that Lauren would be able to do. Whereas for something like my job where, right, I run an after school program, it might be a little bit more iffy in terms of like, how relevant is it to the things that I have to do to complete my job? And it might be where I can squeeze in like, right, I could do 3 hours a week of community gardening and make that relevant to whatever my job description is. Versus somebody like Lauren, like, right, where her job description might be more specifically, I could devote a much larger amount of time to doing this thing. So I would think about that when I think about like, is this a relevant goal for me or for my organization?
Any other thoughts?
When I hear like worthwhile, I probably think of the cooking habits of the Montbello community, mostly just because I've never been there. I'd probably just kind of ask around and see how much worth the people around there would get out of it, like having close access to fresh produce, making sure that the produce is going to be used and appreciated, how many people would be utilizing the garden, how many people would be willing to upkeep the garden. You know, if there's like a big interest in like fresh food and gardening in the community, then sure, absolutely, it'd be absolutely worthwhile. But if people are like, oh no, actually, we all get our stuff from McDonald's down the road, then maybe it wouldn't be used as much. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, thank you, Connie. I think the kind of related to that, what it made me think of is like, do people, I guess this kind of goes to accessibility, but like we talked about earlier, but like if people don't have access to getting fresh produce at like the grocery store, if they don't have enough money for that or whatever, like maybe it's worthwhile to like provide some free produce so people don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too, because that's a great point, Connie. It's also like, right, are there other programs that we can either collaborate with people who do that thing, or that we can set up other programs of like, right, things like, I'm thinking of cooking classes or whatever, like, right, sort of like a health education standpoint of, just because we've provided this resource, is this something that this particular community that we're providing it for, are they already going to be able to like use that stuff and run with it? Or is that more things that we want to think of in terms of like how we're kind of layering whatever this project looks like?
Yeah, and I can add on to that. We've definitely learned with doing this. We were also partnering and working with Doug, Denver Urban Gardens, which they do provide a lot of those informations on how to learn how to garden and just really make it worthwhile in your community. Because it was already an established plot there, and we were just helping add on to it and just really help support them.
So thank you. Our next section is time bound. How much time do you need to plan and get all the materials you need for your project? When and how long will the activity be? Checking calendars to make sure that there's not overlapping events or things like that. And consider what else is happening in that time that you might need to plan around.
This would be a great place to engage with the other partners and figure out what they're doing in the community. Especially, I think, Lauren, you said the Denver, the coalition, I think the Garden Coalition. I'm totally butchering that. But that would be a good place to communicate with partners and figure out what they're doing in the community. And then that would be a great place to have engagement with community partners and just community members, because there might be like a football game going on where you want some of those people who are playing or watching to be at that event and just knowing the community.
For sure. We definitely took the opportunity to just meet with the garden leader and then the contacts with the Denver Urban Gardens and go through that. We learned that a school that was right across the street that actually had a team who had a plot in the garden as well. And we were able to learn about more of the watering schedule, just figuring out how we all work together and helping create more of that bond and that connection.
So I think there's kind of like a two-part thing to like planning out the garden, is how much time is needed to like prepare everything before you're planting, and then also like how much time do you need while you're planting, or like how much time do you need to do the weeding and do the actual planting, do the watering. Those would also be considerations that are coming to my mind. Awesome. All right. We have 2 sections left. Inclusive. How can you engage all kinds of people and help them feel comfortable enough to participate as their full selves? I think one thing I'm just going to put in here that I heard was reaching out to just community members in general and trying to get their input and engagement in not only taking produce, but also like helping maintain the garden.
I feel like another way to help people feel comfortable is, again, just treat them like you're relating to them almost. Like treating them like an actual human being, like not like bossing them around, not telling you like, oh, do this, like you have to do this. Just making sure that they know that they like don't have to be there, that like it's like a fun thing that like you can do to help the community.
I think another way too is like to get them to come with like friends. So like maybe have like the whole football team come, and then like all of them know each other and feel comfortable with each other, and like so they don't feel like they're the only ones there. Because like I know sometimes when that happens to me, I'm like, I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, make sure that everyone knows that it's like anyone can be there.
Yeah.
Or it's like a community thing. It's not just, I don't know. Yeah. We pick and choose like who we want there. I don't know. Just making sure that you're including people. I know that's basically what inclusivity is, but it's like just making sure that you have an opening, welcoming space. You're talking to everyone. You're making sure that you're communicating with everyone. You're not just like
leaving people out too. Like if someone like is there by themselves, you don't want that to happen.
Like scooping dirt. Be like, oh hey, do you want to help me over here? Like making sure involving everyone.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, ladies. I heard when we were talking about not bossing people around, like making people feel invested in coming and not like they have to come, but that they want to come. Those are all really awesome. Okay. Last one, equitable. What are the barriers to participation? How can we reduce those barriers to get more participation? One that I think was brought up earlier was related to accessibility and making sure it's like somewhere kind of central in the community or like a space where most people can get to.
I can think of an example of just making sure that the like what you're planting and what that matches what people are going to want, and making sure that that's like stuff that they're going to use. Because if the plants that you're planting aren't going to match or be what people are going to actually want, then there's not really a reason for that community garden to exist, because otherwise it's just there.
I feel like another thing, like another barrier could also just be people not feeling comfortable. Like people being like, oh, I don't want to go. Like, I feel like I don't know anybody. I'm not going to feel comfortable. So like, again, this like goes with including people, just like making sure you have like, it's a welcoming environment where everybody feels like they can and they want to come to help the community and they're not going to be judged for doing whatever.
Yeah, because I feel like another barrier would be like people would be like, oh, that's for lame people, you know? So like you want to make sure you market it in a way that it's not like seems like something that only like the so-called lame people would do.
I feel like marketing would be a big like way to like break those barriers of like it'll be fun, like make sure it's advertised as like a fun community thing. It's like getting to know people, getting to know your community, not just a chore, not just something you have to do, but like, you know. Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you all so much for an awesome conversation. This was really great. And I hope it was helpful to kind of walk through an example of this to just get some ideas of the things you might want to consider. So we are going to now hop back to the slides and go to the next slide. Sweet, thank you so much. So in addition to making a Smarty goal, I also needed in like my planning projects and figuring all that out, I also needed some help in keeping track of all the tasks and steps along the way to complete projects. And usually this was multiple projects at once. So my supervisor started helping me make project managers to keep track of what I needed to do. I would start with a Word document like this one and write out all of my different projects and all the steps or parts that needed to be completed for each project. Then I would label them by project numbers and make an Excel file. We are now going to switch over to another document so I can show you how I go through that. And that is the project planner template. All right, so this is what my project manager would look like. So in the top left-hand corner, just the left side is where I would write down all of my specific individual tasks that needed to get done. In the top middle, in each of those middle columns, I wrote out each week of a month. And because this was an Excel file, I would make a new sheet for every month so I could look at it by month. And then the right column I used to identify which project this task was related to, whether when I completed it, and also like if it was on a specific day of the week that I needed to get it done. I also would write that in as a note for myself. So then the red section that I have on here, those are tasks that needed to be completed every single week that I would write in. And then I would mark those with X's, also showing that it needed to happen every single week. And then the 4 different colors below that, each color represented its own week so that I could identify how many tasks very quickly, visually, how many tasks I was doing in that week. As you can see here for this month, like it became fewer and fewer tasks that I needed to do throughout the month. So if I was doing this far enough in advance, I would be able to like shift tasks around if I was getting too overwhelmed with like how many tasks I had in a single week and trying to move things later on or earlier or something to space it out a little bit more and not make it so overwhelming, I guess. To give you an idea, going back to our community garden example, in the blue, I made this like for the month of May, kind of going on like planning out like when we need to plant stuff. So another thing that I kind of used this tool for was like if I had a presentation, or here it's like, when do we need to plant the first plants or the first seeds? We're probably going to have an idea of when that is. So here I wrote like the earliest we can plant is the last week of May. So from there, what things need to happen before that so that we're ready to plant on that day or that week. And so then the first week of May is identified in blue. And that I said, identifying who the community garden leader is and reaching out and setting up a meeting with that person. The second week is in green. And so that would be visiting the garden space, learning about the responsibilities, deciding what will be planted and who needs to do what. The third week would be in yellow, weeding and preparing the garden, buying plants and seeds and gardening materials, so that the last week we can plant seeds. And then in the red section here, for every week, it's only identified here as the last week of May because it doesn't need to happen till then, but this would be like going forward throughout the summer. It would need to happen every single week, would be making sure the garden is weeded and watered every week. So that is a very fast, short example of kind of designing a project planner template for one of the projects.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sazi. We're running a little behind time, so I'm just going to talk really, really fast at you guys and then leave out some of the parts where we were going to discuss more things. So just be prepared for me to like scream at you for 10 minutes and then we'll move on. So our final piece of like planning for your project is, I was just going to throw in there, think about evaluation. This is stuff we already talked about with the SMART goals, which is why they're so useful, right? We talked about how do we make this measurable? Is it how many plants we planted? Is it how many plants sprouted? Is it how many people came and harvested the plants? Is it how many people like attended a community event that was sort of like the garden kickoff? Whatever. It's trying to figure out what are the things that you are going to need to report back to somebody, whether that's like somebody who's giving you money for the thing, or it's to your boss, or it's to some of your coworkers to tell them what made this successful. So my life advice / tip is mostly ask your supervisor. Evaluation can be such a big thing that people literally don't get like their master's degrees in evaluation. I'm not going to be able to tell you how to do it in like a minute and 30 seconds. But it's just thinking to yourself, what is it that I'm supposed to measure at the end of this to see whether or not we met our goal? And then talking to your supervisor or your team and being like, hey, do we need to have some sort of community survey like Cassidy? I remember you had mentioned like possibly doing some sort of survey, or is it literally my coworker needs to stand there and just keep track of how many people came to this event, and that's like what we're considering a successful event versus not. Next slide. So yeah, so now we're not actually going to talk too that much of like how do you do the project you've chosen, because we spent a lot of time talking about how do you plan out a project. We gave you some of those different tools of Smarty goals, of the project planner tool, right? And a lot of the doing the project is like, and then you do it and you ask people for help, like the mentors that you've made by the time you're at that point, and then you make some mistakes and it's fine. So I am going to walk you through some of the steps that I highly encourage you guys to do as you're actually in the process of doing the project itself. Next slide. Be ready for my meetings, guys. There's going to be a lot of them. So the main thing I want you guys to take away from this is to document all the things as you go. And what I mean by the things is I mean any sort of accomplishments or like big goals that you end up meeting as you go along. There are three reasons why this is helpful. One, it's for you in the future at work if you're doing a similar project and you're like, oh, wow, I took good notes of what I was doing at this community event. And now I remember how to do all the things that I did last time, right? Back to literally be like, I have a list of the Smarty goals that I made, and then I took some notes about like what did work and what didn't. Second reason it's helpful, it's for you guys in the future, resume, cover letters, applications to whatever, whether that's like school or a scholarship. it's literally like anything that you could possibly need to record your accomplishments for. It's going to be really helpful in the future if you just have this list of like, this is cool stuff that I did. And now it's really easy for me to talk to other people because I didn't just forget about the really cool stuff that I accomplished while I was doing this work. And then sort of related to that, having documentation of what a good job you did so that you can brag about yourself to other people and get things like promotions. Next slide. So what do you document? What are all the things? Right, I said accomplishments, that's what things you did. This, I think of it as two buckets. One of it is qualitative. So that is descriptive things about what you did with that project that made it cool. So maybe that's, I got feedback from these different community members that this was the best community garden they've ever seen in their entire lives, and they're so impressed, right? That's the sort of feedback. If you got somebody say that, that's glowing praise. You want to be able to write it down. Other ways to document accomplishments is quantitative. So this is the numbers, which we've already talked about for evaluation. How many people were there? Did you have brochures that you gave away? How many brochures did you give away? If this was like you were receiving applications from people to plant their plants in this garden, how many applications did you receive and did you review? Being able to say, yeah, I reviewed 50 applications for this garden is really different than being like, yeah, I reviewed 2, or I reviewed some applications. Those all mean really different things. So be really specific for yourself in the future so you remember. Other things to document the timeline. This is literally just, I did this community event in June of 2022. Collaborators, who did you work with? I like to write down the names of people so I remember who I worked with, but also just the organizations that they worked for at the time, right? Again, it's more impressive if I can be like, I worked with Denver Calc and I worked with Rise Above Colorado and I worked with whatever CTC coalition was there, rather than just saying like, yeah, I worked with some organizations. It's very helpful to people and more illuminating if you can be really specific about the people that you worked with, the organizations that you've worked with in the past. And then finally, in terms of how you're documenting things, it doesn't just have to be written notes. We'll talk a little bit about like what that can look like with documenting, but it can also just be like media, right? Take pictures of the community garden and the plants that are coming up out of the ground. Just take some videos, take a TikTok, like save your Snapchats, whatever. That's all stuff that you can sort of save for a little portfolio for yourself later on. So when people are wondering, what cool stuff has this person done? You can be like, well, let me show you all the cool pictures and videos. And people will be like, wow, that's really exciting. That's much more interesting than like, you know, a 10-page document telling you exactly what I did. Next slide. So I hope you guys are liking the memes and the gifts. So I talked about one of the reasons for documenting what you're doing as you're going along is bragging about yourself in the future and telling people what a good job you did. If you're gonna go to all the effort of keeping notes as you go along with your project of what you've done, you should use that information and use it to advocate for yourself. And I'm very passionate about this, so I'm gonna get on my soapbox for a minute, especially if you hold any sort of marginalized identities, right? You're a lady, you're LGBTQ, you're BIPOC, you have disabilities, you're neurodivergent, like, right? Any of those things, we know statistically that we are less likely to sort of like feel capable of advocating for ourselves in the workplace, and we end up getting promotions at lower rates, or we end up like, right, fewer people know about the equally as great stuff that we did. And so this is, as like one human with like some marginalized identities to you guys, this is something I highly encourage, is for you to write down the stuff that you did and then be able to brag about it to your supervisor and make sure that you're advocating for yourself and you're telling people what a good job you did. You're not trying to, like, I do this thing where I try to let my work speak for itself, and I try not to like, right, if it's brag worthy, I feel like people will just notice, but I'm telling you now, like as a supervisor, don't just wait for other people to notice your work, right? Use different methods and avenues to be able to brag about yourself. And I'm going to talk about how to do that. Next slide. I was going to have you guys discuss this, but I'm still making sure that we're getting caught up so we have enough time for the other activities and discussions. So next slide, actually. So this is Catherine's ideas. You can think about your own ideas on your own time, guys. These are my 4 kind of big tips of how do you actually brag about yourself if you're like me and that feels really uncomfortable for you and you're like, I don't even know how to do that. One that's really, really easy is literally just have a system to save appreciations or praise that you get about your work. This could be, right, somebody sends you an email and they're like, hey, you did a really awesome job at the community garden event and I'm really proud of you. You like save that however you want. That could be like you copy and paste that into one document where you're like, Lauren sent me this on June 5th about what I did this day. What I personally do, you can make a label or like a category in your email, and that's what like I have it. It's called appreciation. I tag anything as appreciation of literally any time that a parent or a young person emails me and is like, hey, your program's super great and I loved it today. What a great field trip. I literally like save that as an appreciation tab email. Likewise, if somebody tells you something nice in person, try to write down as close to verbatim as you can what they said. If you did some sort of presentation or you put out a community survey, save the evaluation forms that you get back, like, right? Like literally print them out, put them in a folder, make sure that you have access to them in the future. And then what do you do with that stuff? Give it to your boss. If it's an email or even like a text from somebody, seriously, this is what I tell my youth program assistants who are on here right now. I tell them forward nice emails that other people send you to me. That makes my job as your supervisor a lot easier to be like, oh, look, Auckland was told what a great job she did at this field trip and like how happy people were that she was there. And then that's putting it in a really easy place for like, it's in my email. When I do Auckland's annual review, it's really easy for me to go back and be like, oh yeah, all these people said really nice things about Auckland. I don't have to like even do anything to like write a really nice review for her, right? If you look good, your boss will look good. Make it easy for us to brag about you. So send us the stuff. That includes like, right, if you have check-ins with your boss on a regular basis, or like on a not so regular basis, anytime you have a check-in with your boss, like come up with like, right, all your evaluation forms that you got or the praise that you got from somebody recently and just tell them, be like, yeah, this is how things are going and I got this really great feedback from these community partners. That is a very natural time for you to brag about yourself, isn't a check-in. Likewise, if you do any sort of annual review process, show up with that and be like, here is my past 12 months of all the emails I've ever saved that anytime somebody says thank you to me, I have saved them all so you can see how grateful people are that I work here, right? And then I'll just say that my final tip for that is this is also a great time of any time that you're bragging about yourself and saying this is what a good job I did. You're welcome, boss. Now I made you look good. You also have the opportunity to tell them what you need going forward. Like, right, if you did this community garden event in it, like you have all this documentation of this is why it was successful, what I ended up doing. We planted 50 watermelons and all the community members took them home. Like they were all gone by the end of the day, right? But we need more watermelon seeds next time because clearly everybody loved the watermelons. I don't know why that's the thing that I'm picking. We're gonna need more watermelon seeds for next time. Like, right, that's a very natural place for you to ask what you need going forward. Next slide. Let me just check where I'm at with time right now. Okay, I'm still talking fast. You guys don't get to chime in, sorry. So these are just 2 final, like very concrete methods of what I have done in the past to document what I've done for a project and to brag about myself to other people. On the upper right-hand corner, this is what I call my master resume. It's just a snippet of it. And it's literally just one document where a typical resume should be like about 1 to maybe 2 pages long, like 2 pages if you've been in the workforce for like years and years, right? My master resume is like maybe 4 pages long or whatever. And it's literally, I just write down everything I ever do for my job, right? With the specific numbers, any positive feedback that I got from somebody about that project, so that in the future, I can look back at that if I'm doing like prep for a job interview and I need to remember what the heck that project was that I even did and how it was good or not. And then if I'm applying to that job, right, I can trim down my resume and be like, these are the relevant projects for the specific job now that I'm applying to. That's something I do. It's super easy. I highly recommend it. Then you just make a copy of it for whatever new thing that you apply to in the future. On the left-hand corner, I had this position at one point where I had this big project that I was totally in charge of, and I didn't, like, my supervisor was totally not involved. Like, we didn't even have regular check-ins. And I realized after a while that, like, nobody knew what I was doing. I was doing really cool stuff, but nobody knew about it because I wasn't telling anybody, right? I was just sort of like, someone will surely ask me if this is important. That was not the case. And I sort of realized after a couple of conversations with different people, like, I need to tell people what I'm doing so that they know. So this is an email that I just started sending to everybody. And it was once a week. Sometimes it was like once every other week if I was super busy. And I would just put like a heading of, like, see, I would put a cool picture of something I did that was related to work to, like, make people interested in reading my email. And then I would put a heading that was what I was up to this past week. And I would list all of the things that I accomplished so that they knew. And then I would also have a section that was what I'm going to do this coming week and what I need from you. And I would just send this to my supervisor and any of the people that were significant on the team that I was working on, so that they're just getting like this consistent feedback of like, oh, that's right, Catherine is doing things. Oh, that's right, Catherine's doing a good job at the things she's doing, as well as like, right, the communication flow is still there so that people know in general, oh yes, Catherine is in fact doing things. I have all these emails that tell me exactly what she did. So that is my stuff. I just screamed at you all for like 15 minutes, so I'm so sorry, but we're gonna go to the next slide. And then Lauren's going to talk us through promoting and marketing events or projects.
Yeah, so just really quickly, so we can get back on time, I'm just going to show you a flyer that I've created. It has like just a little mock that you could use in the future. I especially love Canva because of how easy it is for you to work on or share it with your team so multiple people can. So I'll share the link in the chat if anyone wants to look at it. And Chastity, if you can please pull that up so we can just quickly run through it real quick. So here, this is what it's going to look like if you do share this link with other people. It'll just say that you've been invited to edit and design it with whoever's sharing it. So for a flyer, something that we like to do when we're sharing, especially for our future Denver youth, is we have a little header that we always do. So anyone can see it and just kind of associate it with our youth group. So we always put calling all youth. We then follow it up by the age range of who would like to be there and just who we really want to get involved. Though we do have an age range, we don't necessarily have you have to be in that age range because we want it to be for anyone who wants to be a part of it. We then put just who's the group that's hosting it. So it's our Future Denver Youth Collaborative has the host, and the event is our community garden. I added the no experience needed, so anyone knows that they're allowed to be there even if they don't know how to actually garden, and that they know that they can have a chance to learn. We also made sure important to put the location of where it's going to be at and when we're going to be there. So for the garden, we were there about 3 days a week, but just for the sake of this flyer, we just put every Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. so everyone can consistently know that we're going to be there at 8 a.m. every Friday. And another important thing to put on any sort of promotion that you are doing is some contact info. So if anyone has any questions, that they can reach out to you or to someone else on your team, so they know that they will have any questions they have answered, and so that they know they are welcomed and invited to be there. So just going back to our slideshow, and on to our next slide of the actual example of a garden. So Chastity, if you can just go back to our slideshow on the next slide. So the next one is just on this sheet here. It is actually just the timeline that we did create for the garden. We had, starting in March, reaching out and just trying to hear back from different garden leaders and trying to see if we can get access to the spot to apply and just how we can get involved. After hearing back in about April, we were then able to start setting up meetings with the garden leader, seeing what the space looked like and just getting more information on the plot and just any space that they had available and just the produce that they do and do not allow. May, the plot open, so everyone in the garden just got together to start doing weeding, getting any weeds out of the gravel in the plots, and just making sure that the space is available and ready to use. June, was when we were just doing mostly weeding, and then we started getting some of our plants to start growing, and then just normal garden activities. July through August was really when a lot of our plants started to really take off and growing, getting a lot of produce that we were able to share, and just really starting to figure out what we're going to do with it and what we should do, as we were starting to see some results that we weren't necessarily expecting. And then from August to October, we were reaching the end of our season and starting to wind down at the garden. So from the pictures in the bottom left, we have our very first time at the plot, just an open, empty garden. On the right is just after getting some plants in the ground. And then on the top, we have the plants actually starting to take off and grow and just really produce the extra produce. And then in the top left is just a picture of Chastity and I just at the end of the garden season, just a little celebration photo. And I believe in the chat, we're going to add just an example of a case study that we did to really help you understand if you do have to do something for a grant, or if you just want to learn more about the process that we went through when we were doing the garden. So our next slide. Our next slide is just, we're going to have a quick little discussion on just how to bounce back if something's not going right. So just a few questions that we have are just, what happened? How did you react? What did you do? And just looking back on any sort of event or activity that you've had, what would you do differently? And I know we don't have that much time, so maybe if one person just wants to share either a time that they've had to bounce back quickly, or what you feel you would do and how you would react.
We're doing a little bit better on time. So while you all are thinking, I can hopefully super quickly share an example. We'd love to hear from you all as well. I remember my first year at my job, I was asked to provide feedback on an educational resource we were trying to update. I spent a lot of time and intention on how to make it better and gave feedback to my coworker who I was working with for the first time. My feedback was never used, and the activity that I had done research for and created was never put to use. My coworker went in a completely different direction with this document, and also never followed up with me about how some of my feedback might have been used or why they didn't use what I gave them. It felt super crappy and resulted in me not working on another project with this person that was similar to that, like the rest of the time that I was an employee. 3 years later, I was working on something completely different, but an opportunity came up to use a lot of my ideas and the activity from my original project. And I was also working with a different coworker at that time. This person got super excited about my ideas and helped me complete and present the final product, and has gone on to help me make it into its own lesson that they want to promote and encourage people to use. This experience felt super amazing, and I was so ecstatic that this person saw the potential in the material like I did. Some differences I noticed between these experiences were, one, I was simply working with a different person with personality traits and strengths that were more similar and complementary to mine. Second, I realized my content needed to be its own standalone lesson, not smashed into another resource that had its own separate objectives. And third, I advocated for how important and valuable I felt this material would be in the second time, and I had more experience and knowledge about how to do so. We have 5-ish minutes if anybody has another example they would like to share.
I have an embarrassing example of a case when my project didn't go well, so I'll share it in the hopes of encouraging other people to share their embarrassing, sad stories. So when I was a youth advisor for the state health department, I had come up with this idea of I wanted to go to this national conference. It was in Washington, D.C. It was like a real big deal. And so I applied to do this 3-hour training with a bunch of adults, like a bunch of public health professionals who all had like graduate degrees on how to hire a youth advisor and to sort of like take this model of like, right, hiring youth employees and teach people in other states how to do it. And I worked really, really hard on it. I came up with this 3-hour training. My supervisor was technically like a co-presenter, but I literally just gave her like 10 minutes of like some PowerPoint slides and was like, you're talking about this and nothing else. And then I went and showed up to the conference and I was super, super excited and also super nervous, right? Because it was literally like, I think it like maxed out like 35 people, nobody else could sign up. I got there, they were like videotaping this whole thing and we're gonna like stream it live. It's like, I don't know, an example of like youth doing a great job at our conference. And then it totally got all screwed up. This dude who was like sort of my ex just like randomly showed up with his new girlfriend. I was already like very flustered and uncomfortable. And then of course it turned out that like all these activities that I really intentionally planned totally did not go over well. Like these adults were all sitting there like each time after I'd be like, okay, next activity, you're gonna brainstorm about this. And they would just kind of like stare at me. And they like wouldn't say anything. And then they would sort of like talk to each other in hushed whispers. And then be like, yeah, we don't really understand like what we're supposed to do. And I just like panicked. And my supervisor literally took over the training and like right stepped in, was a really good facilitator. And it's sort of like, okay, let's talk about that. Like which parts don't you understand? And sort of like recovered the entire thing. And it was 3 hours, like this went on for 3 hours. It was terrible. And so then at the end of it, we went out to get lunch together to like debrief. And I just like started crying like all over like my sad spaghetti and was like, I'm really sorry that like I screwed that up so bad. I guess the one happy part is my supervisor was like, I didn't think you messed that up at all. Like, I think you did a good job. I think the biggest deal was just like forcing these like really fancy graduate degree people to like listen to like this young person in the first place talk about things. Like literally like anything past that would have been like remarkable anyway. So she didn't make me feel bad about it. She made me feel good, but like I definitely felt very deflated and like, wow, that was a 3-hour training. I trained for like months and it went terribly. That's my story, guys. So we'd love to hear from someone else if you have something that went wrong on a project and like how did you bounce back from it?
I recently had like an engineering project with like this like organization that landed me the internship where I'm working at, and it was like we had to do this competition thing, and I helped kind of like get the idea forward, and then I eventually kind of like had to do like research and stuff into like how we're going to build our product for the engineering competition. And I tried communicating it to them, but I completely got like steamrolled because I was like giving suggestions like, oh, we should build our stuff out of like cardboard and other mixed materials, but completely steamrolled by everyone else because they wanted it to be 3D printed, I think. And then I eventually kind of got like boxed into just doing like the pitch presentation for our engineering stuff. And we had to have like our last like review meeting, and it became like a huge mess because it was like a day before our project was due. We had to like turn it in, and we didn't even have like a prototype itself because we had somebody else build it for us essentially. And I wasn't originally supposed to be like a speaker for the pitch meeting, but I had to kind of like step up and kind of like lead the way. But it still ended up kind of like basically hitting the fan. I kind of just got like to the back seat. I was about to like present my like whole pitch, and then one of the leaders came in and just like completely like took over for me without even asking me. And I felt very defeated because I was like so prepared to give like a good presentation, and we got horrible feedback. And then every kind of like the blame was a lot of the time shifted towards me about the presentation. And it kind of just made me feel very defeated. But I think I've learned that like I had to communicate a lot more and be more of a self-advocate for myself, essentially during big projects like that with like big groups. And also like people will also have like very conflicting and like big personalities as well.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, that's definitely just the main takeaways we want to have is if something goes wrong, just be kind to yourself. It's okay. We're only human. No one's perfect. And mistakes do happen, and they're all learning opportunities. Reach out to a supervisor, just a mentor, and just let them know that this didn't go well, this wasn't what I was expecting, and your supervisor will be one of your biggest allies, and they'll walk you through and just help you understand that though this didn't go smoothly this time, I'll work with you next time to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And see it as an opportunity for growth and learning. Because everything we do is something to help us learn. Like, we're not perfect the first time we do it, so might as well take it as a learning opportunity and just a lesson overall, and just know that it'll get better each and every time that you do it. So
And
thanks for-
also, when other people suck, it's not a reflection on you. And so, like, Chris, great job, like, talking about needing to advocate for yourself. And yeah, like, sometimes things don't go as planned, but hopefully we can bounce back and find ways to get support that we need for the next time. It's me again. Okay. Thank you guys so much for such awesome, engaging conversations. We've really enjoyed this time together. Lauren and Catherine, thank you so much for being my co-presenters. You two are amazing. And I really appreciate both of you. We will be sending out the Smarty Goals template, the project planner template, the project examples that Catherine talked about earlier, project planning questions. Lauren has a video about making flyers on Canva, if you're interested in that, marketing and evaluation resources, and also our slides.